Hey everyone. So I didn't actually want to make this video because I thought the answer was pretty obvious for it to be either Graph or Esther or Sky. But apparently it's not. And there's been a lot of miscommunication, misconception, and whatnot. So here I am making this video, taking me about 5 to 6 hours of preparation, etc. Yeah. So the short version, if you are just interested in the result, my findings support the findings of PodKCS, I think his name is, the funny guy who makes memes about Riser. And John ID. Schultz on Reddit, basically. What it does not support is the claims of a certain someone who thinks Dark Rain is the best unit in the game, and you should be spending your mystery crystals on Sephiroth, for example. So, if you don't like math and would prefer feelings and just I think this is correct, over actual maths, theory crafting, and common sense, this video is sadly not for you. Because I do like to put in science into things and get a picture of reality rather than listening to a gut feeling or personal bias. So let's go. I will start this off with a general idea of how do I get mystery crystals? So these things, they come from series challenges or EX stages from certain challenges. You should watch my budget guides to clear these trials, quote unquote. To get them, and I was channel far. Sorry. So if you haven't cleared them out, there's 10 mystery crystals in total. I think, I'm not quite sure, because one of my viewers asked me yesterday why he only has 9 after completing all apparent missions. I think one was time limited, so I hope you got that one. And I think, I'm not quite sure, because I lost track of all the mystery crystals, because I just did all challenges. But I believe one of them was from Dragon Quest. I could be wrong. I don't know, honestly. I haven't kept track of this, but oh well. So if you did all the challenges though, you should have 10. And this is a mystery crystal, as is shown in the current Behemoth challenge. So how do I spend mystery crystals? Or where do I spend them? You go to the shop, you go to the special shop, and pretty much right in the middle of the many tabs you have, you will find the mystery crystal shop. Now mine is already emptied out because I 130 my Esther. But here you have the choice of Emperor Gigantours and Master's cards. Now the Master card, well, the Master card, the physical Master card, is the most potent card, as the credit card has the most value in the game. You do want the Emperor Gigantor card because the Master's card, as for the time being, is just here for memes. It does unlock 7-star vision cards, but those are missing the passives. I'm hoping it's an oversight on the devs side and we'll get this eventually. And it's not entirely cut, but who knows at this point. I'm still giving Gumi the benefit of the doubt here and hope that at some point we'll get the passives for the 7-star units. Because truth be told, there is a lot of potential for these units and I'd like to use them in my budget guides. But as long as they are missing these passives, I'm not gonna spend my mystery crystals because they are super scarce on Master's cards. And if you have your 10 Emperor Gigantours, you can get a unit to level 130. It takes 10 Emperor Gigantours. Each Gigantor yields 1 level. The process for leveling up your unit from 120 to 130 is identical to getting your unit to level 120, for example. So you just pick the Gigantors and you're done. So this is the point where things will start getting technical. So if math is not your thing, you may as well skip until we talk about, or until I talk about, the priority order. But if you're interested in why my results came to be, strap yourselves in, and I hope you enjoy the math that is coming up. So let's talk about the general math and what an increase in level does to the game and to the units especially. So each level increase increases the base, and this is strictly meaning EX plus 0 stats as a baseline here of your unit. This includes brave shift stats because sometimes, for example, Sky, the base form and the brave shift have different base stats, and the increase is 1% per level, meaning at level 10 or level 130 you are getting 10% base stat increase. So as an example, Sky brave shift has 260 base attack at EX plus 0 at level 120. A 1% increase yields 2.6 attack per level or 26 base attack at level 130. Now if you count for buffs, say Cetra Descendant Aerith buff or the Clash of Wills buff, this yields 26 multiplied by 1 plus 400, which is the stat buff, so it is a 130 attack total that you gain just from being level 130. That is already pretty good, and the overall value of such an increase is equivalent or roughly equivalent of getting an additional EX level. For example, Sky gains 36 base attack from going from EX plus 2 to EX plus 3, and 26 is actually very equivalent to that. It's still a lot of difference, 26 to 36, it's a lot, especially with modifiers and all, but yeah, you get the gist, right? But there's more, and that is coming from the so-called level correction formula, which is a very important part of the overall damage formula. So with each level, the level correction modifier increases your damage. So even a 121 unit will deal more damage than a 120 level unit, which is obviously apparent because you have 2.6 more attack. But as you can see, the previous, or the, well, let's not call it previous because there's only one unit we can go to get to level 130 right now. But currently, most units have a 2.2 level damage correction multiplier. Units are at level 130 though have a 2.3 level correction damage modifier because it's 1 plus 130 over 100, meaning it's 1 plus 1.3, meaning you have a higher modifier. And this difference between 130 and 120 is exactly 4.545%. That is already a huge increase just from your level up. Not only from the attack side of things, or magic side of things for the magic DPS, but just a general outline of being higher level means you will deal more damage flat out. That's already pretty good, right? But it gets more interesting. So let's check out a few units. And I picked basically all the meta units right now and checked their gains, basically. So checking gains. They are in a training, really training again here. So we've got Esther, Sky, Angela, Darkrain, Kane, Lara, Tybus, Oren, Seth, Graf, Tifa, and obviously Curtin. And as you can see, their base stats very vastly different. And the huge outlier here is Curtin with 291 base attack, which I find kind of funny. I don't know why they gave him such a weird number. But I guess this is what it is, right? So I think I have a mistake on the list. 29 plus 1.1 multiplied by 1.1, sorry. Nope, it's fine. 320. That's all good. So no mistake. And yeah, how much do they gain? Basically from these stat increases, right? So Sky, due to being 260 attack, being the lowest, which is kind of sad, but she gains 130 total attack. Esther 150 total attack. Now the outliers here are mainly Angela, Dark Reign, especially Graf and Carton, because those units, they have either storing mechanics or they have certain buffs, such as Graf, who gains 1000% attack when unarmed, or Carton, who can use, or who uses Frenzy's DPS basically, and Frenzy is a berserk effect that also affects base attack, meaning that's multiplying as well. So he effectively gains a 10x increase to his increased base stat, which is rather nice. So those units, they will appear to be stronger by this comparison, which can be a little bit misleading, and the results may surprise you, or will surprise you, when you actually take into account their overall damage and how much relative and nominal gain there is to be made. So the next slide is going to talk about the damage increase with these values in mind, and that's going to be very, very interesting, trust me. So these are the results. Source is my personal DPS spreadsheet that is available. I have all the units at 130 calculated in there. You can check it out. It's below the like button in the description below. So what can we see here? Now there is a very, very important differentiation to be made. It's nominal or absolute gain and relative gain. Relative gains are usually shown in percentages, and those can be highly, highly misleading. And yeah, let's check out the results first, right? So as we can see, units totally expectable: Graf, Carton, Angela, and Dark Reign. They do scale very well, right? Angela 8.9 gain, relative gain. Dark Reign 8% gain. Graf 11% gain, which is the heaviest outlier here. And Carton at 9.6 gain. Now, we also have a few lower outliers, such as Oren, but Oren's to be kind of expected. We also have Sephiroth at 7.3, or Oren at 7.4 for Seth and 7.3 for Oren. Esther also apparently rather low, right? But that's only half the truth, because you have to actually look at the big picture and the absolute gains. And those paint a rather different view or picture here. With Skye in Clash of Wills, she is already the queen of DPS in Clash of Wills, no matter what. And with that 7.7 or 7.8 if you round it up, gain, she also has an absolute gain of 145 million, which pretty much tops out the whole chart. And at the end of the day, there is an argument to be made that both numbers kind of matter, but when you really just want to maximize damage, it's not about percentages, it's about the absolute value. And if you can reach 200 million by increasing a unit's, or because I'm going to reference this example on the next slide. If you want to reach, say, 121 million, you only need a 10 percentage points gain, or 10% point gain in damage from 110, instead of using a technically weaker unit, but who has a higher gain. For example, like going from 100 to 121, that's going to take a 21% increase, and that's more than double of what you need for the unit that needs less. So there's always both sides to be considered here. And there are a lot of people who will use such statistics and results to willingly mislead people. Now, we have had countless of examples in the past 2 years where this happened. Now, I don't really want to derail this whole FFBE discussion with vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, but both sides are at fault here. The anti-vaxxers, for example, used hospital statistics. I can just recall this from German statistics, where they said, well, there's more vaccinated people in the hospital than unvaccinated people. yes, if you look at the numbers, the absolute numbers, there's about 50 million vaccinated people in Germany and 20 million unvaccinated ones, or from the general adult population. And thus, there is a higher chance of vaccinated people being in hospital than unvaccinated. It's just, yeah, relative numbers are very misleading if you don't look at the whole picture. And the same applies to this as well. And so what this does basically, yeah, graph has the highest scaling in all of this, but this doesn't translate into actual usage, because the actual usage, as you can see on my sheet with my assumptions, he doesn't have the highest gain, the highest absolute nominal gain. And this is what's important after all, because if he goes from 3 billion to 3.3 billion, but that's cool, but that won't increase your score as much as, say, Sky going from 200 million to 500 million, for example. That's the whole thing here. Now, of course, if a unit increases by 10 and you reach more damage, that's cool, but it always matters to check for both and not just for one, because it is highly misleading to just look at one. So, and this is what I'm talking here, which matters more. The lower your damage, the higher percent you need to reach the same amount of someone who's higher up in damage. Like I said, the example at 110 and 120, or from 100, you need either 10% to reach 121 or 21%. So higher ceiling, the less you need. Again, so that also means that units with already higher damage output, Sky, Esther, Kane, or Angela, gain the most out of going to level 130 by that measure. Not saying right out of the gate that absolute values matter the most, but it's saying from this point of view. Some units with bonus stat buffs, Angela, Dark Rain, Curtain, and Graph, gain higher relative gains but lower nominal absolute gains than expected, especially Dark Rain and Curtain. Now, Dark Rain, he is very easy to explain because he inflates his magic stat with huge amounts of static magic, which don't scale at all. Now, Curtain, he is a little bit of an outlier in my sheet, especially because he is built for aquatic killers, and that doesn't translate well into damage. But yeah, he has less base attack than other units with 291. That's kind of weird, especially when compared to units such as Avalanche's Tifa or Esther, who have 300, or Graph, for example, he also has 300 base. So that's kind of expected. But then again, the good modifying scalar of him being a frenzy unit or berserk unit, that helps a lot. And it is what keeps him in the meta after all. And then there's a third aspect, and that is common sense. Which units will matter the most in 3 to 4 months against trials which will become more relevant in the near future, such as Rafflesia or the new Cerberus trial that was announced today on the JP server, which, for example, does a huge amount of lightning damage. And we just got that one unit to deal with lightning damage perfectly. So, or is it a unit that is super good in Cow and will remain super good in Clash? Lara comes to mind, Sky comes to mind. Those units, there's nothing on the horizon that could actually beat them in terms of what they do. Like, I don't see another unit that tops out Sky, because if there is one, you will be using Sky and that unit. So Sky is still going to remain that very, very potent unit and very good unit that you should be level 130ing. Or what if you want to cheese Dark Vision bosses? There's countless of options, like the upcoming Vision World boss. You could cheese this with either, say, Dark Veritas, but that's gonna gimp your damage. Or you could just use Carton, for example, who has Dark Absorb. That's a cool idea, isn't it? And with going to 130 on Carton, you could also boost his damage pretty much by 9% or whatever it was. So that's a good option. But then again, probably using Esther or Graph regardless, and I would say those are better targets for your Gigantors. But yeah, this begs the question, will it be Esther? Will it be Graf? Carton? Maybe even Angela, who takes 12 turns to get going, but she has almost 9% of a gain, which is very good. Or maybe is it even Tyvus, who I haven't talked about much yet, but Tyvus in the near future, especially when paired with Ronda, gains some huge and crazy LB modifiers, which go up to above 600x, which, phew, boy, that's gonna be tough. But I mean, still, it takes 2 units to pull it off, but there are a lot of things to consider for longevity, and the picture should be on a more broad scale. It's not just what I really want to say. Yes, math is important, relative numbers are important, and absolute numbers are important. Both need to be considered. But at the end of the day, common sense is what should apply the most. And this is going to be what's driving the driving force at the end when we get to the priority order. So there's also one more misconception that I've seen, or I didn't watch, but I've heard from my viewers and other people on the FFBE Discord. So let's talk about the misconception about single hit versus multi-hit versus chain LB. Because there appear to be people that think that Knights of Grandshield has a 750x or so LB modifier just because he hits twice. So let's clear that one up. So there are single hit damage dealers or LB finishers such as Sephiroth. 350x, 9.9999 etc. billion ceiling for that. Fine. Then there's double hit damage cappers such as Ibarra. Those have 2 individual hits. Both of them can hit for 9.99 billion. There's also Sky, who has also 2 very individual hits. Can hit 9.99 billion as well. And then there are chain LB cappers. LB chainers, let's call them that. Units, or example units, Esther, Cetra Descendant Ares. And for them, it's kind of complicated because the formula, which is also very outdated, and I haven't found that. I was looking for it for about 2 hours on Reddit because I really remember it being on Reddit somewhere, but for the life of me, I couldn't find it. The formula is sadly not on the wiki as well. But yeah, let's take Esther as an example, and I'll make sure to explain this as well as I can. Without showing the formula because I couldn't find it, sadly. But if anyone has it, please share it in the comments. I'd love to see it because that would also make calculating the damage even better or easier. But yeah, so Esther's Extreme Nova LB chain is 30 hits. This doesn't mean that each single or each individual hit can hit for 9.99 billion. That would be wonderful if that were possible and would make so much easier, but that's not the case, as you've seen in my videos for the easier Dark Vision bosses. You should also watch my chaining video, which is in the top right now, hopefully, if I didn't forget about this. And you will know that some abilities are so-called backloaded. Backloaded means that the brunt of the damage happens on the very last hit, and this is also the case with Esther's Limit Burst. Now, sadly, because Esther hits her damage ceiling rather quickly, it's hard to say what or how much her damage formula or how her damage formula actually works. Especially on the last hit, whether it's 60% of her total damage, whether it's 70% of her total damage, I don't know. And that is why I need this formula for it's going to make this calculation a lot easier. But yeah, it'd be nice to know. Maybe I should actually just check my last videos. When Esther deals 5.3 billion and 1.3 billion is the last hit, this could be a good indication. I'd say it should be 40%. Not sure though. Don't take this for granted, and don't pin this on me. But yeah, and what happens for the remaining 29 attacks is that it's going to be weighted on average, and the damage proportion is always 100%. Well, I shouldn't say always, but it's because it's not always. But the damage proportion remains at 100% for Esther. There are a few exceptions to this rule. There are a few units who have more than 100% and less than 100%. We're not talking about them because that's not the case here, and those units are not in a matter at all because those are 7-star units. So Esther's 29 remaining hits have a different proportion for each hit throughout the chain. Now, since Esther is a chaining unit, she starts at 3x chaining. You can see this in the top right of your screen when you start chaining. You have that indicator stating you're starting at 0% chaining, chain acceleration, and you end up at 6, meaning you reached your maximum, or you reach 3, meaning you reached your actual full potential damage. And that translates into the 6x damage cap as well, or 6x capping as well. So there's a way to boost this, chain accelerators, which is commonly gets confused with chain cap increase, which are two totally different things. A chain accelerator would be Yuna, the premium Yunas, TMR, Spira, and the TMR of Avalanche's Tifa, which is also its chain accelerator, meaning your chain capping from, say, 2 Esther's chaining gets to maximum damage quicker. And on average weight, or when you averagely weight the damage skills of Esther, or the damage skill of Esther from her LB, you will land at 5.91x chain modifier, which isn't 6, such as on single hit or double hit finishers, but keep in mind, the brunt damage is at the very end, on the very last hit, and that very last hit will always hit that 6x cap. Now, this 5.91x chain mod will get increased, obviously, if you're using chain accelerators. You can use 1, you can use 2, has to be on different units. I don't know how much you can increase this, truth be told, but I know 1 works at least, and if you're using 1, you are having a higher averagely weighted damage modifier on Esther. But 5.91 is the usual case if you cannot afford to use a chain accelerator on her. And this means that Esther will reach her ceiling damage rather quickly. The maximum I've seen so far from using this on a Cactuar fight, which has very low defense, and thus Esther can cap damage on each single hit, is this 51 billion thing. So this is not 30 multiplied by 9.99 billion, as you can see, but it's a proportion of the damage each and every time. Meaning units, in theory, if they were able to cap each hit on a final Dark Vision boss, again, hypothetically speaking, such units would be worth a lot more. And we've seen that on the so-called gatekeeper bosses, meaning this were the Slagworm, I believe was his name, and Dark Alexander, this Dark Visions. If you're using Esther, all you need is Esther chaining, because Esther capped that Slagworm on her own. Meanwhile, units such as Sephiroth or Dark Rain, they cannot cap this stage on their own, because these units, they are locked to their 9.99 billion damage forever. Does this matter on the boss that actually matters, the final Dark Vision boss? No, not so much. But it makes things a lot more clearer when you look at those quote-unquote gatekeeper bosses. And it's a case to be made that needs to be really kept in mind. So don't forget about these chaining abilities, because those are important. And there's another thing to keep in mind here. Using Esther over someone like, say, Sephiroth means you can dump a whole unit. Previously, you would have had to use, say, Louise for chain botting. Now you can Louise to LB, because you just imbue the actual supporting unit, say, Crowned Rain, and he can chain with Esther for her max damage. Meaning the other 4 units can just do the thing, Limit Burst, or in the case of Graf, Triple Collapse, which is fine. And Whereas previously, you would have needed to use, well, 2 chainers, one of them being either a dead, or 2 of them being dead slots, say, for example, Cetra Descendant Arif in most cases. So yeah, there's, no, Cetra Descendant Arif was a bad example, but I hope you get the gist. Anyway, so using your 100 or your 10 Gargantuars to get Esther, for example, to 130 is a very good idea. But is she the best idea? Let's find out, because this is the last slide for today. Who should I get to 130? I personally used it on Esther. And why I did so, we'll get at the end, because that's at the end of this too. But I think there isn't really a clear-cut answer to this, because we have 3 very different usability cases. One, there's dark visions. In dark vision, the priority order should be something like Graph is equal or over Esther, because Graph gains the most. When Graph gains 10%, that's a lot. You're gaining, say, 300 million on a boss, whereas with Esther you gain 200 to 250, depending on the killers, depending on the type of bosses. Esther might be better because she has more stats, more killers, thus gaining more damage. It super much depends on what you're fighting. So you should view Graph and Esther being equal. You should also view Graph, Esther, and Kayn being equal, because Kayn is also in the same place. If Kayn works in your comp, say a lightning or light comp, definitely worth it. And then there's Angela. If the boss allows you to go to turn 12, it is a very, very good option to use it on Angela. However, Angela is only really cool in Dark Visions, and not so much in, say, Clash of Wills or Trials. So let's check out Clash of Wills priority order, because in that case we have a whole new slew of units. Suddenly Skye makes an appearance. Skye is a great, really, really great unit to use level 130 on, because she has the longest shelf life of these units. She scales super, super well with the Knights of Grandchild card, as this will free a lot of slots that have been usually locked to, say, LB material or equipment pieces. She opens up for more killers or resistances, because she has 80% attack on the Knights of Grandchild card. So there's a lot of things to consider with Skye. She can use great swords with Esther being around. Esther's great sword is absolutely magnificent, and those two pair super, super well together. So there's a point to be made that Skye should be your number 1 priority for Clash of Worlds. I wouldn't be surprised at all if people such as Alan Wanderer or Sinsar also used Esther or Lara to get to one, or will get Esther or Lara to 130, because those are perfectly viable units to 131st. And I would totally be behind this either way. So whether it's Skye, Esther, or Lara, or even Carton, because he on paper has the highest gain from this, it's all fair game, honestly. And this is what it's about, right? But you have to keep in mind, Carton, he is slowly fading out of the meta. He is great for just killing stuff and being the ODK king, because his Feral Frenzy scales rather well at low morale, but scales rather badly at high morale. I personally wouldn't give Carton level 130, but I can see why people would do it, because the scaling is so good. And from that point of view, yeah, Carton should be on this priority order, but with more and more units coming out that do very high damage, Carton progressively, I can't English today. Carton fades out of the meta, let's put it this way. And I, for one, I'm not too sad about this. But on the other hand, he makes things a lot easier with his strong chaining move. He also pairs well with Lara, for that matter. But anyway, and then there's the general usability, aka future-proof units. And these include all the 2 above as well as trials, which will become very, very hard in the near future, with Death Machine coming up, being the first one that will test our unit's strength to, well, to the bone, basically, and it will show which units are good and which are absolute garbage tier. And from what I've seen, what I've talked about with Sinsar and others, it would appear that Esther is the absolute bestest pick out of all of those. Not only does Esther's Omnicover help in a lot of scenarios, it's also that she can absorb lightning damage. And for some weird reason, a lot of upcoming trials are using lightning damage. I don't know why, but this seems to be a thing. So, yeah. Esther seems like the greatest pick here, and it's the reason I picked it, even though I'm a Sky fanboy. If it were me, and if I were just a Clash of Wills player, I would just go for Sky. Honestly, hands down, no questions asked. If it were just me being a fan of a unit, I would go for Sky right away. But this being me, and me being the min-maxer and the I want the best out of the best, I had to go for Esther, even though it hurts my heart to not go for Sky. So take this from someone who's biased towards Sky. And yet here I am at 130 Esther. Then there is Lara Croft. Lara Croft, as long as Dark Vision bosses on Global have 0 passive defense, she will be on every single team unless there is a new unit who deals more damage and also does that 90% defense break. A 90% defense break is so strong, it makes up for so much damage, you just cannot neglect it if you are going for top 100 scores. And this is what is important to note here as well. Because if you're not going for a top 100 score or even higher, top 50 score, this whole video is basically useless to you, because at the end of the day, if you're just a top 500, top 1000, which is absolutely fine, right? I'm not going to judge anyone who doesn't care about these rankings, but what it really comes down for these types of players is, who do you favor the most? Are you a fan of Graf? By all means, he's a great, great pick. But will he help you the most in trials? Probably not going forward. Will he help you in Clash of Wills? I don't think so. But if you're a fan of the unit, don't care too much about best rewards, best units, highest scores, top ranks, go with your favorite. But if you care, you probably should check out who's the best to use it on. And this video is for those people. And then there's also the future proving of Sky. I could have put Louise on this as well, but Louise doesn't deal any damage. Sky doesn't deal a lot of damage outside of Clash of Wills, but since she has that 50% accuracy down and is a pretty darn good unit in Clash of Wills, I put her on there too. Maybe because I'm biased, but who knows. But yeah, Sky should be on your priority list as well. And to honor PodKCS, Ryzer could be there too for memes, because Ryzer scales the absolute bestest with these 130 level increase in stats. Because Ryzer, if you've looked at his kit, has that 44,000 attack boost, much like Carton, for example, or Graf. So Ryzer, technically speaking, is the best unit to use it on with his best scaling, but let's be real, he's just a meme. Alright, and that is it for today. I really hope I was able to get the point across, and that you guys should be really careful when you watch videos without any numbers, without any proof of what people are saying. It's so easy to lie with statistics these days. It's me as a scientist, it's just concerning, because I know how to read statistics. I know how they work. I've done countless of t-tests and chi-square tests and whatnot in my student life, and it's really disheartening to see how people treat math these days. And I'm a huge fan of math. When I see empirical studies, I just dive right into them because I enjoy it so much. And I don't know, it's just sad, really. And that's why I made this video, just to get the point across that, yes, spreadsheet people have their point, and some people may say, do it on Sephiroth. And I wouldn't be surprised if Sinsar, for example, used it on Sephiroth because Sinsar loves Sephiroth. And by all means, like I said, if I didn't care about Dark Vision rankings or so, I would have 1/3'd Sky right away and not Esther. So if Sinsar does 130 Sephiroth, it's for good reasons. It's for the right reasons, because he's a fan. So always keep that in mind. And with that, have a wonderful rest of the morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you're from. And we'll see each other soon for more guides. I don't know. Oh yeah, my Dark Vision's clear too, with the Fire Team and Crowned Rain. So see ya then. Bye bye.